The basement door creaked open, and Ryan Fletcher's voice echoed down the wooden stairs. "Mark, you down there, buddy?" Silence answered him. His work boots thudded against each step as he descended into the dimness below, one hand trailing along the cool concrete wall. "Mark, it's me. Lisa's got your drill in the truck." Still nothing. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the unfinished space. Then Ryan saw it, a boot lying at an odd angle near the furnace. His heart lurched. "Mark?" He moved closer, and that's when the smell hit him. Copper and something worse. His best friend lay face down on the concrete floor, a dark pool spreading beneath him like spilled paint. Ryan's legs buckled. He fell to his knees, hands shaking as he reached for his phone. No. His fingers fumbled with the screen. When the 911 operator answered, Ryan was screaming words he couldn't even hear himself say. That's how it started on May 12, 2017, in the quiet town of Millridge, Indiana, a devastating discovery that would rip through a close-knit community like a tornado through a wheat field. But this story isn't really about that moment in the basement. It's about what led there, and more importantly, about what came after. Because in the days following Mark Stevens's brutal murder, police would uncover a web of lies, a hidden double life, and a betrayal so profound it would haunt everyone who touched this case. The man who discovered the body, the grieving best friend who sobbed in the driveway as police lights painted his face red and blue, would soon become the prime suspect. And the motive? Well, that was something nobody in Millridge saw coming. Mark Stevens was the kind of man people genuinely liked. At 43 years old, he'd lived in Millridge his entire life, watching the small Indiana town grow from a farming community into a modest manufacturing hub. He'd worked at the Precision Auto Components plant for nearly 20 years, clocking in every morning at 6 sharp, lunch pail in hand. His coworkers called him reliable, generous, always ready with a joke to break up the monotony of the assembly line. Mark was openly gay in a town that wasn't always comfortable with that reality, but he handled it with grace and humor, winning people over simply by being himself. He never locked his doors. He loaned money he knew he'd never see again. He was the guy who showed up with a casserole when someone got sick, who helped jumpstart dead batteries in the grocery store parking lot. Mark would give you the shirt off his back, his neighbor Mrs. Patterson would later tell reporters, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I just can't understand who would do this to him." Ryan Fletcher seemed like Mark's opposite in every way except the ones that mattered. At 31, Ryan was a decade younger, married to his high school sweetheart Lisa, father to 2 young children who thought their daddy hung the moon. He worked the same shift as Mark at the plant, operating the hydraulic press that stamped out engine components. Ryan was quiet where Mark was gregarious, serious where Mark was playful. But somehow, improbably, they'd become inseparable friends. They carpooled to work. They fixed each other's trucks in Mark's garage. Ryan's kids called Mark Uncle Mark and climbed all over him at backyard barbecues. Lisa considered Mark family. Everyone in their circle did. It was one of those friendships that made people smile, the kind that seemed to prove good people still existed in a complicated world. On that Friday evening in May, Ryan had borrowed Mark's cordless drill to fix a deck board at home. He'd been meaning to return it all week, but kept forgetting. Finally, with Lisa nagging him about it, Ryan loaded his wife and 6-year-old son into his Ford F-150 and headed over to Mark's house around 6:30. The ranch-style home sat on a quiet street lined with mature oaks, the kind of neighborhood where kids still rode bikes until the streetlights came on. When they pulled into the driveway, Ryan noticed Mark's car was there, but the house looked dark. "Probably in the basement workshop," he told Lisa. "You guys wait here. I'll just run it down to him." He grabbed the drill case from the truck bed and headed around to the side door, the one Mark always left unlocked for friends. It opened easily under his hand. What happened next would be told and retold 100 different ways, but the basic facts remained consistent. Ryan entered through the side door, called out for Mark, got no answer. He walked through the kitchen, noticed drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the counter. Odd. Not like Mark at all. A cold feeling crept up Ryan's spine. He opened the basement door and descended those stairs, calling Mark's name into the gathering darkness below. And then he found him. The 911 recording captured everything. Ryan's panicked breathing, his incoherent sobbing, the operator trying desperately to get him to check for a pulse even though they both knew it was pointless. He's gone. He's gone. Oh God, Mark. Ryan's voice broke into pieces. There's so much blood. Who would do this? Who would do this to him? Millridge Police Detective Sarah Chen arrived on scene at 6:52 p.m., just as the sun dipped behind the trees and the first curious neighbors began gathering on the sidewalk. She'd been a detective for 7 years, but nothing in her experience prepared her for the rage evident in this crime scene. Mark Stevens lay face down in his basement, 2 gunshot wounds to the back of the head, execution style. The house had been ransacked. Drawers emptied, closet doors hanging open, couch cushions tossed aside. It looked like a robbery gone wrong, a burglary interrupted. But Chen's instincts immediately prickled. Something felt staged. The chaos seemed too deliberate, too theatrical. And then there was Ryan Fletcher, sitting in the back of a patrol car, being comforted by his wife, while his young son played with a toy truck nearby, oblivious to the horror his father had just witnessed. Get his full statement, Chen told the uniformed officer. Timeline, everything. When did he last see the victim alive? Who else has been here recently? I want details. Ryan gave his statement through tears and shaking hands. He and Mark had worked together that morning, clocked out at 2:30 like always. Mark mentioned he was heading home to do some yard work, nothing unusual. Ryan hadn't seen him since. We were supposed to grab beers tomorrow, Ryan said, his voice hollow. We had plans. Who would do this to him? Mark didn't have enemies. Everybody loved Mark. Detective Chen nodded sympathetically, making notes. She asked about Mark's personal life, his relationships. Ryan confirmed what others had already told her. Mark was gay, single, lived alone. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious lately. Did Mark seem worried about anything? Chen pressed. Any conflicts at work? Money troubles? Ryan shook his head emphatically. No, nothing like that. He was good. He was happy. This doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to Detective Chen either, but she'd learned to trust the feeling that something was off. The ransacked house bothered her. She walked through it slowly, cataloging what was supposedly stolen. Mark's wallet sat on the kitchen counter, $73 still inside. His laptop was on the coffee table, untouched. A flat-screen TV hung on the wall, easily worth $1,000. His car keys dangled from their hook by the door. What kind of burglar leaves cash and electronics? Chen muttered to her partner, Detective Mike Torres. The kind who wants us to think it was a burglary, Torres replied grimly. They looked at each other, the same thought crystallizing between them. This wasn't random. This was personal. The next morning, Chen's team began the painstaking work of building a timeline. They requested traffic camera footage from the intersections around Mark's neighborhood, security camera feeds from nearby businesses, anything that might show vehicles coming and going. And that's when the first crack appeared in Ryan Fletcher's story. A traffic camera 2 blocks from Mark's house captured a Ford F-150 matching Ryan's truck turning onto Mark Street at 3:14 p.m. that Friday afternoon, 4 hours before Ryan claimed to have arrived with his family, 4 hours before he discovered the body. Chen stared at the timestamp on the screen, her pulse quickening. She called Ryan in for a follow-up interview. He arrived at the station, wearing the same haunted expression, dark circles under his eyes. Chen offered coffee, kept her tone gentle. Ryan, we've been reviewing security footage from the area, just trying to establish Mark's movements on Friday, and something came up that I need to ask you about. She showed him the traffic camera still, his truck, clear as day, time-stamped 3:14 p.m. Ryan's face went pale. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, right. I forgot about that. Forgot? Chen kept her expression neutral. Can you walk me through what happened during that visit? Ryan shifted in his chair, suddenly unable to meet her eyes. I stopped by to return the drill earlier. But Mark wasn't home. The door was locked, which was weird. So I left. I came back later with Lisa because I figured he'd be home by then. But Mark's car had been in the driveway all afternoon. Chen knew this from the same security footage. If Mark was home, why didn't he answer? And why would Ryan claim the door was locked when Mark never locked his doors? The inconsistencies piled up like snow in a blizzard, each flake individually small, but together creating an impenetrable barrier between Ryan's story and the truth. Chen thanked him for coming in, told him to get some rest. The moment he left, she turned to Torres. "We need to look at his phone records, and we need to look at Mark's phone, right now." Mark's cell phone had been found on his nightstand, undamaged, despite the supposed robbery. The forensics team unlocked it and began combing through his data: calls, texts, photos, apps. What they found in his messages made Detective Chen sit back in her chair and exhale slowly. Months of intimate text exchanges, hundreds of them, between Mark and a contact saved under the name Rob. But the phone number didn't belong to anyone named Rob. It belonged to Ryan Fletcher, registered to a prepaid phone purchased with cash 6 months earlier. The messages left no room for interpretation. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same time? Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I wish we didn't have to hide like this." Mark and Ryan had been having an affair. For almost a year, secret meetings when Lisa was at work, when the kids were at school, the careful construction of alibis and excuses, and most damning of all, the recent messages from Mark that showed increasing frustration with the secrecy. "I'm tired of pretending we're just friends. I want more than stolen afternoons." Ryan's responses were always the same: asking for patience, promising things would change, begging Mark to understand his situation. Chen called Ryan back in. This time, there was no gentle coffee and small talk. She laid the phone records on the table between them, let him see the evidence with his own eyes. Ryan's hands began to shake. "I can explain," he whispered. "Then explain," Chen said flatly. And Ryan did, but the story that came out was nothing like his previous version. Yes, he admitted, he and Mark had been involved romantically. It had started as a friendship that gradually became something more, something neither of them planned but couldn't resist. Ryan was deeply closeted, terrified of what it would mean for his marriage, his family, his standing in the conservative community where he'd lived his entire life. The auto plant where they worked wasn't exactly progressive. Coming out would mean losing everything he'd built. So they kept it secret, meeting in Mark's basement workshop, stealing moments that felt both thrilling and suffocating. "But Friday," Ryan said, his voice cracking. "Friday, it all fell apart. I went there at 3 like usual. We were together, and then we started arguing. Mark said he was done hiding, that he wanted to be open about us. He wanted me to leave Lisa. I told him I couldn't. I just couldn't. And he got angry, really angry. He said if I didn't choose him, we were done. All of it, the friendship, everything." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "He had a gun. I don't even know where it came from. He pointed it at me, said he'd tell everyone if I left. We struggled, and it went off. Twice. I didn't mean to hurt him. It was self-defense. Then I panicked. I thought nobody would believe me, so I messed up the house to make it look like a robbery. I left. Came back later with Lisa so I'd have witnesses. I know it looks bad, but you have to believe me. It was an accident." Detective Chen listened to this new story with a poker face that would have impressed Vegas dealers. But inside, her mind was racing through the forensics report she'd received that morning. "Ryan," she said carefully, "there's a problem with your story. The medical examiner found that both bullets entered Mark's head from behind, at a downward angle. Mark was either on his knees or bent over when he was shot. There are no defensive wounds on his hands, no powder residue on his skin, suggesting he fired a weapon or struggled with one. The trajectory of the bullets is inconsistent with a face-to-face confrontation or struggle." She leaned forward. "The evidence suggests Mark was executed from behind, likely by someone he trusted enough to turn his back on." The color drained from Ryan's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I want a lawyer." Those 4 words ended the interview, but they didn't end the investigation. Over the next 48 hours, the case against Ryan Fletcher solidified like concrete. His original alibi was demonstrably false. His second story contradicted the physical evidence. His motive was clear. Mark threatened the life Ryan had carefully constructed, the image of the straight family man who would do anything to protect his secret. The murder weapon was never recovered, suggesting premeditation and planning. Ryan had the means, motive, and opportunity. On May 15th, 3 days after Mark Stevens took his last breath on that cold basement floor, Ryan Fletcher was arrested for first-degree murder. The trial became the biggest thing to happen in Millridge in decades, the courtroom packed with spectators every single day, reporters camping outside, national news outlets running features about the hidden affair that led to murder. The prosecution painted Ryan as a calculating killer who executed his lover to protect his double life, then coldly staged a robbery and involved his own wife and child as unwitting alibis. This defendant didn't panic, the prosecutor argued, pacing before the jury. Panicked people don't carefully arrange crime scenes. They don't return hours later with their family. This was premeditated murder, and the cover-up was just as calculated as the crime itself. The defense did their best, arguing that Ryan was a tortured man trapped between two worlds, who made terrible decisions in the aftermath of a tragic accident. But the forensics were damning. The bullet trajectories, the lack of defensive wounds, the missing weapon, the meticulously staged crime scene. Lisa Fletcher sat in the front row throughout the trial, her face a mask of devastation and betrayal. She'd had no idea about her husband's relationship with Mark. The affair had been conducted entirely behind her back, in the hours she thought Ryan was working overtime or running errands. When she testified, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "He used me," she said, staring at the prosecutor instead of at Ryan. "He used our son. He made us part of his lie, made us witnesses to his own crime scene. I don't even know who he is anymore." The courtroom was silent enough to hear hearts breaking. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous: guilty of aggravated murder. Ryan Fletcher showed no emotion as the word guilty echoed through the courtroom, but his shoulders slumped as if the weight of what he'd done had finally settled onto him completely. At sentencing 2 weeks later, the judge looked at Ryan with something like pity mixed with contempt. "You killed a man who loved you," the judge said. "You shot him in the back of the head while he was vulnerable and trusting. Then you manipulated your own family, dragged them into your web of lies, made them accessories to your performance. The betrayal here is almost incomprehensible: life in prison without the possibility of parole." Today, Ryan Fletcher sits in a maximum security prison, his appeals exhausted, his future measured in decades behind bars. Lisa divorced him before the trial ended, took the kids and moved 3 states away, started over somewhere nobody knows her name or her story. The house where Mark Stevens died has been sold twice, neither family staying long. Sometimes, late at night, neighbors claim they still hear sounds from the basement, though that's probably just the pipes settling or the wind in the eaves. Mark's friends and family established a scholarship in his name at the local community college, a small gesture toward making meaning from meaningless violence. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the people we think we know. Ryan Fletcher was a devoted father, a reliable co-worker, a man who seemed incapable of violence. But beneath that surface lived someone so terrified of exposure, so desperate to maintain an image, that murder became preferable to truth. Mark Stevens wanted love without shame, openness without fear. That desire cost him everything. In the end, this wasn't a story about passion or betrayal alone. It was about the destructive power of secrets, the crushing weight of living a lie, and the moment when that pressure became so intense that someone decided death was easier than honesty. The friend in the frame wasn't the victim hanging on Mark's wall in those family photos. It was the friend who pulled the trigger, who chose violence over vulnerability, who turned friendship into a funeral. And now, for the rest of his life, Ryan Fletcher will have nothing but time to think about that choice, alone in a cell, haunted by the ghost of the man he killed to keep a secret that came out anyway. CTA. What did you think of this tragic story of secrets and betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into true crime cases that explore the darkest corners of the human heart.